We will now proceed to the second keynote speaker, who is Mrs. Miho Taguma, who works for the OECD, the Directorate for Education and Skills, and Mrs. Taguma has always worked in the higher education field, first as a practitioner and researcher for academic community, and then a researcher for policymakers. She joined OECD as an associate expert within the framework of the Japanese government's Ministry of Foreign Affairs scheme, and she has been working with several subjects: post-secondary e-learning, recognition of non-formal and informal learning, and credit transfer to promote lifelong learning and internationalization of higher education. And also you have actually worked before OECD for UNESCO. So this is quite a record, and we are very pleased that you are here today, and I look forward to your keynote presentation. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Good morning. Yes, I'd like to hear louder voices, even though I'm not retiring yet. Good morning. Thank you. My name is Miho Taguma. I'm from the OECD, and thank you very much for introducing some of the OECD work. And I was very happy to see one of your conclusions, which is the research is more needed with aligned learning, and because we use different taxonomies and different definitions, so research is not advancing, because even for OECD, when we try to synthesize a lot of research, one research talks about certain competence, but using different meaning than that one. So it's very difficult for international comparative research. So in order to advance or promote your research, we need to start talking, using the same language. So for the first day, I was thinking, since this is a second day, I wanted to build on your already established knowledge and try to link it to my presentation. So then I decided to take a lesson from yesterday's keynote speakers, Mr. Muller's point. We need to keep asking questions. So instead of me presenting OECD's work, I would like to pose more questions so that you will get confused, but that is the competence for the unknown world. Then I, of course, wanted to be efficient for your own this lecture. Then I decided to take 2 of the questions for the conference. Then I can be relevant to the organizer, so that you invested good time to invite me here to deliver the good added value for you as well. So the first one is really defining 21st century skills and also drivers for change. So I tried to relate 2 of these questions to the OECD's current work, but then instead of presenting the OECD's work, I came up with more questions, which is, so this is my questions about these questions. First one is, what is the difference between 21st century skills and 21st century competencies? Maybe you already got the answer from our first keynote, very good speech. So we capture 21st century competencies as a much wider concept than 21st century skills. Then the second question is, what are the 21st century skills? And a lot of researchers talk about cognitive skills, metacognitive skills becoming more fashionable to talk about, then non-cognitive skills. Economists usually so broadly separate cognitive and non-cognitive. That's it. So it's very difficult to apply economist research to education field. And soft skills, or social and emotional skills. So there are so many different terminologies being used. Then another question, this is actually one of the critics against 21st century skills movement, is what about knowledge? Don't we need to revisit 21st century knowledge? So for the knowledge, and thank you very much once again, the first speaker, because you already mentioned about interdisciplinary knowledge and disciplinary knowledge. And also practical knowledge is often forgotten. And this was a criticism we received from the vocational and education sector people. So we tried to capture a lot of different dimensions. And the last question is, what are the other aspects that are important for today and future? So attitudes and values, it is quite controversial whether we should add values or not, but at least in the school sector, there are many countries who are actually becoming more explicit about values in their curriculum. And of course, attitudes and values can be described differently using the terms such as dispositions in the UK, or aptitudes, or mindset, character, and beliefs. Again, all over the place. And on top of this, students and teachers are thrown in all of these competencies. Now you need ICT literacy, financial literacy, media literacy, health literacy, now environmental literacy for social development goal 4.7, COP21, which was agreed in Paris, and OECD, we are setting global competencies to measure in 2018, and also UNESCO putting global citizenship. So all these demands coming from world or parents. So what is happening is, as I said, taxonomy, terminology is really a mess. And teachers or policymakers themselves are confused to create good systems or curriculum. And what is the most worrying is that students are having more and more demand. And there is an big issue of curriculum overload in all OECD countries. And on top of this, I just realized, because of this messy terminology in the field of vocational or adult learning, it is very difficult to make people's skills or knowledge or competencies visible. So maybe if we have a clear terminology, we could really advance the recognition of prior learning or accreditation of prior learning too. So what we are asking for the time being is, since the starting point of this exploration is school, the first question is, how can we clean up this mess and really help policymakers across OECD countries or within OECD country to advance this discussion about curriculum overload. So we are trying to develop our learning framework, and I will present it later. And the second question is, how can curriculum or standards or content framework be redesigned and implemented effectively so that students can have time to learn deep, not learning more and more, touching upon a lot of different topics. And also, out of many things, what are really the key aspects that students should learn? Because if we only listen to all these demands, there is a long list of competencies, long list of knowledge, but what are the ones that really matter for them for the future? So we are conducting international comparative analysis. Then let me walk you through some of the changes that the students are going to face, and we are facing too. So this is an article from Economist. Oh, I realize I can see this here, so I don't have to show my back to my audience. Okay. So this is an article, and that talks about the automation. So the kinds of things that are easy to teach by teachers are more likely to be replaced by machines and digitalized and outsourced. Then we looked at the kinds of demands or the tasks. Then we can say, if we compare from 1960 to 2009, we are not including, so we can see that the trends can be even further. So the routine and manual, or non-routine but manual, the demands have been decreased. And interestingly, even though it's cognitive, but routine are also on the decrease. So then, non-routine and analytical, and non-routine and interpersonal are on the rise as a demand. So what implication will we have? And even thinking about 2030. And a lot more is coming with the technology, the Google autonomous car, 3D printing, synthetic biology, brain enhancement, and nanotechnology, and so on and so on. But here, as an OECD representative, I want to show other things, which is not about economy and technology, because oftentimes we get the wrong image. So this is still technology, sorry, but I wanted to show this to you because technology and education, if we compare the rate of change, then first, when there was no technology, education was not a gap, but after Industrial Revolution, there was a time of social pain because for those who benefit from such an Industrial Revolution and for those who did not, there was a gap. So then the countries, the systems were established to close the gap by providing universal public schooling. And then the society prosperity came. But after this, once again, we have this digital revolution. Then we need to change. So what kind of change do we need in education? And in order to close this social pain time, we need to make the change as quickly as possible, not staying as status quo. But for the time being, OECD country representatives recognize that the teachers are likely to prefer the status quo. So how can we actually make this transformational change happen? And curriculum is one way. There are many other ways too. But here, yes, thank you very much. You're already talking about VUCA world, so I don't need to go into detail, but I wanted to show to you that we are observing a lot of different aspects than just economy and technology. So migration, environment, citizenship, modern family, peace, security, health, employment, inequality. May I drink water? Sorry. Yes. Thank you. And so very quickly, I will show you some of the trends with OECD data. So this is the increase in migration. As you can see, that the more people from non-OECD countries are coming to OECD countries, and there are a lot of implications for the future as well as for education system and the attitudes and values, especially that what kind of attitudes and values should be fostered through education. And a growing carbon dioxide emissions, it is growing. But then last year, we agreed internationally that we will work on this collectively. So what do our students need to do to achieve this international agreement on environment? And very unfortunately, there is a growing income inequality, looking at the Gini coefficients in many countries. And only a few OECD countries have decreased, but in many countries, it is growing since 1950, 1980, 2010. And OECD countries are aging, and unfortunately, Japan is my country. It is one of the rapid changing countries. And overweight and obesity among children, we don't have the trends, but this is actually a big issue in some countries like UK, US, Greece, New Zealand, Italy. So what does it have as an implication for education and family education as well? And the health expenditure is rising. It's not only because of the health problems, but as I said, OECD countries are aging, so there are a lot of elderly-related health expenditures as well. So the implications for lifelong learning is important too. And as you know, I'm from France, and I witnessed a lot of unfortunate incidents like terrorist incidents, and it is increasing very, very rapidly in these days. And this is why many countries are now articulating values in the curriculum. So on top of knowledge, skills, attitudes, but there are more and more countries who really show what values should be fostered in school. So all of these social challenges and issues are all connected. So this is why many scholars argue for the importance of interdisciplinary knowledge. But that said, we have a lot of questions about this as well. So what does this all mean for education? We really believe that each individual student needs to have their own compass and be responsible for their life so they can navigate their life. But how can they actually do that? How can education system help them to be able to do that? So, this is, you already saw our framework, the work in progress from our first speaker, thank you very much. But our way of capturing competency is really very broad first, but not broad that students have to learn everything. So we need to really select in the second round what are the key concepts. But as a framework, it should be really broad. Then we go into competency. So our definition or the scope of competency is to include, and the students can actually mobilize knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values based on their own judgment, because in a particular complex context. So we are not making a list, but it's up to each student to use which knowledge to use and under what conditions. Then most importantly, this is still work in progress, but we really want to keep this section of action. Even though students learn all of this knowledge, attitudes, and skills, but unless they use it for better lives and better world, it doesn't mean anything. So action is very important. And this action should drive towards the overarching educational goals, which is well-being, both at the individual level and society level. And well-being does include economic prosperity as well as social cohesion. So just to give you some of the thinking that we are going through to select some of the constructs for each. For the knowledge, as I said, the question mark. So disciplinary knowledge, is it less important than advancing interdisciplinary knowledge? Well, when we look at math teaching, what we see today, may not be what math teaching that should happen in 2030. Because when we look at PISA, we look at focus on word problems. That is like a formal math where students can immediately recognize this is a math and they solve problems. Then you can see the exposure, the rate of exposure, that how often students are exposed to this. If we look at Iceland, they are exposed really high, whereas Shanghai, that they're quite low. But if we focus on the math concept, how much students are exposed to mathematical concepts, key concepts, not like word problems, then the order of Shanghai and Iceland go the other way around. And Shanghai students perform really well on math. Again, so this really gives us some food for thought. For 2030, we could probably revisit the math and disciplinary knowledge. And interdisciplinary and competency, should we create new competency programs? It's a question mark. Because, again, from PISA, we see there is no correlation at all among countries who provide financial literacy programs and actual financial literacy performance. So what is important, according to experts, is what they learn in math class, which is a fundamental construct for financial literacy, as well as critical thinking, as well as attitudes and values about the knowledge of the financial. So financial literacy could be embedded in different subjects without creating new course and that overcrowd, again, the curriculum. The skills, this is one of the big area because we have cognitive, metacognitive, social-emotional, physical, and practical. So this is a currently reviewed list of cognitive and metacognitive constructs. And of these, metacognitive skills are becoming more and more articulate in school curriculum thanks to the research of brain science and how it matters. And this is a list of social-emotional skills, again, currently under review. And we are reviewing this construct with 4 principles. One is whether they really matter for the students in later outcomes, so impactful. The second is the relevance. So are they really matter or relevant for their future? And the third is malleability. Are these constructs malleable or learnable in school? And 5, well, measurability, so how far they can be measured. And this is just to show you whether it matters or not. Yes, it matters because this is about the college completion for USA. And you can see the college completion is, regardless of cognitive skills or social-emotional skills, there's no much difference. However, if we compare the happiness at 20, drawing on the longitudinal study from New Zealand, you can see that at the cognitive level, regardless of the cognitive level is low or high, New Zealand people are quite high, are happy, like maybe Danish colleagues as well, maybe higher in Denmark. But when we look at the socio-emotional skills, the higher the students have, then the more likely that they report that they are happy at the age of 20. And this is an example of practical and physical skills. And I must say this is an area that vocational and education sector people really told us, oh, you can't forget, you can't miss or neglect this area. So again, our framework is work in progress, iteratively with a lot of people. And finally, attitudes and values. This is, again, a very messy domain for the moment. In particular, when we talk about values, the first question is, whose value? And countries do not want, of course, OECD to go into this value, which is more like UNESCO. However, a lot of countries recognize that, oh, there are some common values across OECD countries too, and explicitly made in their curriculum. So now we are conducting some comparative analysis. And some of the common values we found across different OECD curriculum include respect, trust, responsibility, self-confidence, growth mindset, and so on. So the list is longer. But here again, as a questioner, we are asking whether there is a difference between value or the attitudes in general and attitudes in subject-specific. So if we look at responsibility general and bullying at the age of 15, again, drawing on the longitudinal study from Korea, we can see it really matters for bullying at age 15. So the more sense of responsibility one has, they are likely not to commit bullying. But of course, the remit of this study is self-reporting, so there are some social desirability issues. However, it has been well regulated by the researcher in Korea, so it is quite reliable. But how about responsibility not in general in life, but on math, for example, their own performance on math? How responsible do students feel about their own performance? Then it's very interesting. Because if we compare Shanghai, who perform really well, and are there any French audience in here? Oh, okay. Sorry, I included France as a contrasting country, but no criticism. So you can see the students from Shanghai, China, are more responsible for their own performance. Whereas French students report, again, this is self-reporting, they report that it's sometimes, for example, sometimes the course material is too hard, so it's not me, it's the course. And sometimes I'm just lucky. The French students report much higher than this. And the French students, again, report much higher for teacher did not get students interested in the material, for example. So there are many responsibility avoidance responses in some students, whereas some students feel they are in charge of their own performance. So that really leave us some questions we haven't responded yet, which is, what's the difference between core competency and subject-specific competency? Just like this responsibility is one example. And also, what are the key concepts that students should bring with them when they leave school? And what are the subject-specific content which they could forget, but still they can be a good citizen? So then I just want to conclude with one example from British Columbia, that they are one of the most advanced, or we don't know whether it's effective on the ground, but at least at the conceptual level, that they are very advanced because they separate core competencies and they identify these core competencies. But in the curriculum, they are aware that there are subject-specific competence. So under DO, they call it curricular competency and learning standards. And on knowledge, too, they separate into understanding big ideas of the subject and content learning standards, which are specific topics. So it will be interesting to continue this discussion with our member countries to see whether these conceptually beautiful framework does actually work or not, whether teachers understand this or not, whether students actually perform well or not. So this is to be tested. And finally, if you get interested in our work, there are certain ways to be engaged in our work. So if you are government officials for the framework development, please do come to our OECD meetings. We have twice a year. And if you are academic researchers, we are in the process of construct analysis, which you saw a lot of construct. Now we are reviewing them. Please join us. And other stakeholders, business leaders, school network, student organization, or teachers organization, or ASEM network like this, we are conducting a survey for future competencies in need, so please do participate. And for the comparative curriculum analysis, if you're government or government-related institutes or university with the government approval, please do respond to our policy questionnaire on curriculum. And if you're academics, please do join us, our comparative analysis on curriculum. And if you are other school network, we will triangulate our framework with the field experiences. So we will be collecting some case studies on the curriculum implementation. So I think whatever your background, you're most welcome to join our collective efforts. Thank you.